just fed them out with a commercial pellet. That's predominantly the feed that we give them. Pigs are an omnivore, so much like us, their anatomy internally is very, very similar to a human. They have one stomach, which you think, well, that's pretty normal, but for ruminants, which we'll go see a little bit later, such as goats, they have 4 stomachs. And so they can take the pasture, the forage, the forbs, etc., and they can ferment that in their gut and extract all the fats and the proteins and synthesize that into flesh, bone, everything. So pigs can't do that. They love eating grass. They'll do it all day, but there's nothing. They can't get anything from it. So in the wild, they'd be foraging for fruits and nuts and small animals, grubs, bugs, that sort of thing. So they, by moving them around, and we move them, and I'll talk a bit about that when we move up into the sun. We move them about every 2 weeks. So they get the opportunity to forage from here, but it's not nearly enough. We obviously supplement with the feed. We buy that in. It's just a basic commercial feed. We don't use organic feed. It's not by choice. It's just not really available. There's only 2 mills in Australia that do organic livestock feed, and they're both in the Darling Downs in Queensland. And essentially the freight doubles the price from there. And think about the food miles. Think about all the diesel that you're adding to that. So we're obviously trying to keep our food miles down as low as possible. So we buy from the most local mill we can, which is actually in Young. We buy that through a local rural supply store, Bungendore Rural, which I can highly recommend. They are brilliant. They bring it out, put it into our silos, feed them out. Now we try to use alternative feeds wherever we can. We do every week. We get a couple of pellet loads of food scraps from fish markets. So we've got an arrangement with Whiffins there, and that's great. We were getting eggs for a couple of years now from long paddock eggs up there, and we'd freeze them into buckets and feed them out. The pigs love it, and it worked really well in that regard, but logistically it just became a nightmare. They've been locked down now in basically a biosecurity arrangement, and it just became impossible. You just can't do it, which is a real shame, and this is where the authorities come in and think they're solving problems, and they create more problems. So now they're just burying that, because it's a lot of eggs, and they go through their packages. We're talking thousands and thousands of eggs a day. And so we just get all the cracked ones. So we're talking a couple of buckets like that every day. It's now just going to waste that could have been turned into food. And we've got some chestnuts up there. We get some acorns. People collect things because there's a lot of oak trees in Canberra. So this time of year, people have been going around and raking them up for us, and which is awesome because they don't want to see them go to waste, and that's been really cool. There's a chestnut farm just over the hill, and they brought over a whole heap of chestnuts for us. So that sort of thing would be great. And in an ideal world, in 50 years' time, this will be all planted out with, you want to go over? Planted out with fruit and nut trees, forage trees. Good, sounds nice. And so you can feed a pig through waste stream feed and alternative feeds. There's a farm down in Dalesford, Victoria, called Jonai Farms, which if you want to look in there, they're amazing. Tammy and Stu do an amazing job down there, and they're 100% waste stream. And that was our aspiration. They have a lot of volunteer labour, so they have interns, which is you're not allowed to have in Australia, but they're volunteer labour, so they come and apprentice with them. Because going, collecting and managing and handling all the food actually is almost a full-time job. They're at about the same scale as us as far as the pigs are concerned. They have their own on-farm butchery, which we would love too, but again, it's a lot of labour. So we're talking about somewhere between 5 and 10 people full-time on that farm. So whereas we're 2.3 people. And so it just is not quite feasible. The other challenge with it is they get a lot of sugar. So they get barrels and barrels of like jams and syrups and muesli bars and all sorts of things that just gets left over, which all waste that would go to landfill, but then the pigs get fed a lot of sugar, and it's not the ideal diet. It's not the ideal diet for anyone, and so your food is only really as good as the food that it eats. So we've actually come to the conclusion we feel really good about that. We give them the best food that we can acquire, because a lot of farms like ours do actually get a lot of waste stream feed, and some of the stuff they feed is just rubbish. Joe and I aren't like that, but there's some really bad examples out there. So that's our compromise. I would ideally love it to be organic. I really would, but I think it the food miles, but it puts us at a price point that makes things very difficult. I think about it every 6 months. Really, I go through all my spreadsheets and I contemplate putting it to our subscribers, but I just can't jump that hurdle just yet. So hopefully, and we keep talking to some of the local producers, and hopefully we can encourage them to finally step over the line and go organic. But everything else we do is essentially organic. We don't vaccinate, we don't worm, we don't use antibiotics, we don't use any inputs at all other than the feed that we bring in.